Dear friends, welcome to the session on land reform policy and practice in India. This session has 4 objectives. First, to understand the importance of land reform policy and practice in India. Second, to develop insights about the important components of land reforms. Third, to analyze the pattern of land ownership in rural India. And fourth, to identify key bottlenecks to improving rural poor's access to secure and sustained land ownership. The contents of the sessions are such as land reform policy and its implementation in India, abolition of intermediaries, tenancy regulations, ceiling on land holdings, consolidation of land holdings, landholding status of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in India, land rights of the women, 4 case studies on successful implementation of land reforms in India, finally conclusion and future policy direction. To begin with, land reforms can be defined as the redistribution of rights and interests in land in favor of the landless and the poor cultivators. Land reform constitutes one of the important institutional reforms for ushering in egalitarian growth. Land reform is basically a state subject. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, was quite critical of the agrarian relationship between 2 predominant social classes, namely the landlords and the peasants. He emphasized that Swaraj would be of little avail if it did not solve the problems of the Kisans. Under the leadership of Nehru, the land reforms was introduced in the early 1950s. Also, land reforms got priority in the constitution, which begins with the preamble that is based on 4 cornerstones of justice, liberty, equality and fraternity, and further strengthened by the certain specific provisions, particularly the directive principles of state policy. The land reform strategy has 4 aspects: abolition of intermediaries, zamindaries and other forms of intermediaries, tenancy regulations, ceiling on land holdings, basically fixation of the land holdings of the farmers. Finally, consolidation of disparate land holdings, basically consolidating the scattered lands into one plot. Government of India has started land reform strategies starting from 1950s. In the 1950s and 60s, the functionless intermediaries and zamindaries were abolished in several states. However, there is a kind of a growing conflict of interest. The interest of the growing middle peasantry were in conflict with the marginal landholders and landless poor. The undue delays in legislative and legal procedures also diluted the spirit of land reforms, and in the process land reforms movement received a setback. However, states like Kerala and West Bengal had made remarkable progress in the field of land reforms, and in the large number of holdings has been reduced considerably. Implementation of land ceiling was disappointing. Lack of political will, loopholes in the state acts were the major factors for delay in the implementation of land ceiling laws. As the result of implementation of land ceiling laws since 1950s, as on March 2002, a total of 7.35 million acres of land was declared surplus land, and 5.39 million acres of land was distributed to 5.65 million beneficiaries. Under the Bhodan movement led by Acharya Vinoba Bhave, which could not be sustained, about 4 million acres of land were donated, out of which 2.2 million were distributed as of September 7, 1999. This is yet another indicator of ineffective implementation. So, there are some isolated cases of successful governance initiatives in terms of land reforms in the country. The effective implementation of so-called Operation Berg of West Bengal helped 1.4 million sharecroppers to establish their rights to tenancy, fixation of a fair rent, and also provides access to institutional credit. However, the abolition of intermediaries and imposition of ceilings on land holdings had over time contributed to the growth of capitalist farming and prevented the concentration of land ownership. In 1976-77, 72% of small and marginal holdings accounted for 28% of operated area. By 1995 and 96, these tiny holdings constituted 78% of the total operational holdings, commanding 32% of the area. However, the performance of the Tenancy Act has been of mixed in nature. Concealed tenancy has been on the rise, and tenancy reforms have benefited the middle peasantry more. The latest data indicate that about 124 lakh tenants were conferred ownership rights and nearly 156 lakh acres were accrued to them. However, the emergence of the reverse tenancy in states like Haryana is a matter of serious concern. The benefits of contract farming also needs to be addressed more carefully. Now coming to the land question and the marginalized, the landholding status of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in India today. As we know, the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in India are considered to be the most marginalized and vulnerable groups. The National Sample Survey data 2006 reveals that vast majority of scheduled caste households constituting of 80% are marginal farmers and over 11% are landless. In case of the scheduled tribes, the marginal farmer households constitute 63.1%. Tribal land alienation remains a continuing problem, and only in about 50% of the cases the tribals get a favorable verdict. Coming to the question on gender and land rights, rural women in India continue to be deprived of secure land rights. About 35% of rural households in India are de facto female headed from widowhood, marital breakdown or male migration. This is as per Government of India estimations 1998. As women generally own and control land, it has serious efficacy and equity implications. Even the Hindu Succession Act has been amended in 2005, which gives equal rights to men and women in matter of inheritance of both self-acquired property and joint family property. However, the law does not have any retrospective effect. There are 4 major case studies, we can say best practices in the context of innovative land distribution schemes in India. Government of Karnataka initiated the scheme called Namma Bhoomi-Namma Thota, that means my land, my garden. This is a scheme which was implemented in 2005 and 6. About 17,000 families have obtained plots or land rights. Coming to West Bengal, in 2006, Government of West Bengal launched a scheme called Chaso or Basar Bhumidan Prakalp, that is cultivation and dwelling plot allocation scheme. Under this scheme, more than 1,300 landless families have benefited and got land rights. Similarly, Government of Andhra Pradesh launched the Indra Kranthi Patham project in 2002. During 2004 and 9, the Indra Kranthi Patham project subsidized the purchase of about 4,539 acres of land by 5,303 women with a total amount of rupees 2,937 for the land. Similarly, in Odisha, Government of Odisha launched a scheme called Vasundhara scheme in 2004. Under this scheme, more than 2,50,000 landless families in the state have been benefited from allocation of micro plots till March 2007. To sum up what has been discussed so far, despite various measures of land reforms undertaken since independence, high incidence of landlessness, growing marginalization of land holdings, and informal, albeit insecure tenancies, and consequently poverty and indebtedness continue to plague India's rural economy. In view of various limitations, it is suggested that both ceiling and non-ceiling approaches to land redistribution should be attempted. There should be a special land tribunal to expeditiously dispose of all ceiling surplus lands related cases and distribute about 2 million acres of land which have been declared surplus land in various states but not yet distributed because of litigation. Government should launch a special scheme for allocating at least homestead plot of 10 cents in size to all landless families in a time-bound manner. Finally, leasing in and leasing out of agricultural land should be legalized and permitted within the limits of various states. Thank you for watching this video. I leave you with few quiz questions which you can attempt later.